Welcome to the next episode of CoVerse, the podcast, part of the Insurance Nerds Network, where we will be shining light on the best stories and storytellers in the industry. My name is Whitney Doig, and I am joined by my co-host, Zaira Salcido, and two very special guests, Laurel Jordan and Bobbie Shrivastav. Laurel and Bobbie, it is such a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And with that, we're going to get right to it. I'm going to pop it over to Zaira, who's going to be asking our first couple of questions.
Yeah, thank you, Whitney. Can you both share a bit about your background and what initially drew you to the insurance industry?
You want to go first, Bobbie, or you want me to?
I can start, Laurel, with this one. So what initially drew me to the insurance industry, I would say I've been in the industry off and on through even before I started my career. So when I was in after high school, when I was in college, I remember coming home and knocking on the nationwide agency door to say, do you have an internship opportunity? I'm first year college student. I would love to learn. And I would say that was my first exposure to insurance, more on the P&C side. And when I was, even as I furthered into graduating college, I continued to work at an agency, not only just in my hometown, when I went back for summers, but also in my college town. So I worked at two nationwide agencies. I think that's a bit of the background that a lot of people don't know. I was exposed to insurance even before the InsurTech side. I was during my career back in 2011, after I did my MBA, I was offered a position at AIG division, their division, mortgage insurance division called United Guarantee, which is now Arc Capital. I was there for a few years. So been exposed to insurance, but I would say I really fell in love with the insurance industry in 2016 when we came across like the use case for what now is Benekiva. And that has a lot to do with why I'm committed, why I probably won't leave the industry, because I'm actually in love with it. And it's the pain point of how do we solve claims and how do we make it not just from a claims perspective, but how do we make it better for the operations folks? So throughout my career, I've been very focused on building systems and processes from an operations viewpoint. And I think this just married up when the three founders came together to build what is Benekiva back in 2016. We all came at it from different lens, and my lens was, how do we make it better so that people don't have to carry their little daughters or infants to just do a claim process, right? That was my pain point that led me to build my first company and now Benekiva. But second of all, I've always worked with operations. I know how hard it is. I have a lot of empathy that they sometimes don't get the tools and the service that they need. And how can I, as an entrepreneur, really pave that path?
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Laurel, can you share how you kind of came about it?
Well, it's a funny story. Bobbie knows my story. I was fresh out of college. I was a new young mother, and I was working at a bank because, I needed those hours to coincide with daycare. And I got robbed, and it totally threw me. And I was beyond myself. And I was like, I can't do this. I have a baby. I can't do this. And so I quit. And a friend of mine who worked at CNA Insurance in the home office there in Nashville, Tennessee, said, we have a job in the mailroom. It'll at least give you something to do until you find whatever your next path was. I majored in business and accounting, both in college. And I was like, okay. So I went, and about a week in the mailroom, they were like, what do you think you could handle a little bit more? How do you feel about becoming a new business underwriting case manager? And I was like, sure, I'll learn it. And they put me in the select issue department, which was the high risk policies and required more investigation and more. And I was bit by the bug, and I fell in love. And So then, as time went on, they started bopping me around all areas of operations. I spent some time in reinsurance. I spent some time in back office. I spent about 2 weeks in contact center and said, nope, that's not for me. Um, and I landed in claims, and I started in long-term care claims, and really fell in love with the claims space. And through the next 10 years, I long-term care claims, I started in support, then I started adjudicating, then they moved me over to life claims, same process, and then I became a supervisor, then the team manager, then went into SIU because the investigative piece really, I loved it. And then from there went on at that company to become the director of claims for all 36 of their clients. Spent 23 years there, and didn't have the good sense to, hey, you can do more. And, I was focused on raising my children and wanting to make sure I had home work balance. And I didn't want to travel. I didn't want to jump into leadership. So when the last one went off to college, I changed my mindset and moved into transitions and conversions and was a client rep, and then was approached by my last company to come over there and help them build out their TPA space. And that's where Bobbie and I met. She actually did my onboarding on my first day because my supervisor at the time introduced us and said, I have a call, but I'm going to let you two get to know each other. And stayed there for a little over 4 years, built out their TPA space and brought 9 clients live, and then met my current company at a conference, and they weren't in this space as of yet, but they asked, we were having just a general conversation in Vegas at ITC, and 6 months later, they reached out to me and said, we're going to dive into this space, and we'd love to bring you over as an officer and help us build this. And so I've been here 8 months now, and loving it, and falling on a lot of my operations background to help build up our ecosystem and do things and make it. We want to really come at the TPA space with a different mindset than a lot of the other competitors out there have done. We want to make sure service delivery, the tools, and all of that is paramount, because as someone who worked all the processes throughout my career, everything Bobbie said, it's painful, it's hard, it's manual. And so my leadership team here with us, we sit down and we all have the same, we want to make it different and we want to make it better. So that's what we're focusing on as we build out our business now.
Beautiful. I find it really, well, hashtag because of ITC, right? Like I definitely heard that come through. But also like it inspires me that a lot of us came about the insurance space after something bad happened to us, right? Laurel, I'm so sorry that you had to go through a robbery. Like that was so random, and I had to like double check if that's what you had said. But that's horrible. It's horrifying. And then Bobbie, going through the claims process, either as a new mom or as an injured person, it's just not the nicest experience. And it is carriers delivering on the promise, right? So it's quite a letdown when the experience is so intensive, labor intensive on your part, when you just don't even know the process, right? Tell us about your journey that led you to start the podcast.
I'll start this one, Bobbie. Bobbie and I have spent a lot of time together in the 5 years that we've been friends and colleagues. We've worked together on projects, at my former job, Benakiva is the claim solution. So we spent a lot of time together, and we'd speak on panels together, go to conferences together, and we would just start having conversations about these voices aren't out there. A lot of the podcasts, a lot of the conferences, they tend to follow the same structure and schedule, the same topics. And Bobbie and I really wanted to bring a more authentic human voice to it. And we started throwing around, let's do a podcast. And I was, the one class I did not do well in college was public speaking, and it made me nervous. And I was like, she talked me through it. I hated it. Although I could sing in chorus and up at church and anything else, but you get me to start talking, as you can see my hands start flailing, and I was like, I don't know, Bobbie. And she was like, no, we can do this. And so we started working out a schedule, and we put forth what we wanted to start with and the topics, and we have a long list of things and seasons that we want to do. And then we went about just both speaking to our connections and colleagues, friends we've met along our paths, and really wanting to get different, unique voices out there and not always just the leaders or the biggest person who won the biggest award. They get a lot of attention, but the processors and the other people that are really fighting the real world problems, Bobbie and I wanted to give a voice to that. So Insurance Sync was born, and it's constantly evolving. So
Love it.
That is so cool. I
It's
think it's so
echoing
neat.
everything Laurel said, right? Because we find that, as an entrepreneur, right, it's very difficult, like, unless you have good support from the event organizers. And sometimes you have to really build up that relationship network. Um, and now, but there are so many voices that never get heard on stage. So this is really like a passion project for both of us, is how do we give that opportunity to folks?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and to tackle the real issues that are around our industry right now. We really put focus on that. We just finished up our season on fraud, waste, and abuse. It's not talked about like it should be.
Mhm.
And we're getting ready to talk about one for claims in the ICA annual education conference. Education is paramount in our industry, and people just, they want to shine the light on all the pretty shiny new things and not talk about the things that need to be addressed and fixed to make it better for the next generations. And
Mhm.
so we're as you can tell, I'm passionate about it, and so is Bobbie, and that's our love for it. And I mean, it's never a chore for us. It's something we both, I mean, it's the highlight of my week, talking to people and getting their nuggets of wisdom and their insights. And so
One of the things that I've heard both of you say is bringing a voice to those that have not had a voice, talking about the things that are not talked about enough that deserve to be talked about more. And I feel like this resonates with me, especially you both spend a lot of time talking about women in insurance, what it's like to be a woman in the insurance space. And this is something I feel like I could completely get on my soapbox about, because it's definitely a unique experience that not everyone goes through in the industry. What is it? What are the challenges? So, can you both share a little bit of some of the biggest challenges that you've faced being a woman in the insurance space?
I would say for me, and I think it's something that it's not a struggle, but it's more I can't change somebody's perception or their bias. And a lot of the industry, especially when you're looking at um, insurance companies that have been operating the same way, potentially their leadership is very similar, right? They just have an unconscious bias. And when they see, and honestly, I'm gonna say this, when they see a strong female leader that doesn't look like them, they're they it takes a while. And for us, we don't have to lose ourselves. We're still going to stay strong. We're going to still continue to I'm not going to shut down, right? Because I this person X can't handle this personality. But I think it's there. and and honestly, we just have to continue to be confident and continue to have this support system to advocate, so that we are continuing this momentum, this push, right? Women leaders often go through more scrutiny than this is a fact. We're not making stuff up, right? These things happen in real world scenarios, whether you are a startup or whether you are a carrier, whether in most industries, right? We're picking on insurance because we're in insurance, but women have to prove themselves over and over again to get the job, to get the recognition, to get the title. We have to work pretty much a little bit extra, a little oomph, right? Like, this is why I talk a lot about the hustle. We have to continue to hustle. I don't have an advocate that's pushing me. I'm building advocacy. I have advocacy, but it takes time. And it's the current state. So I would say our current challenge is, it continues to be one that I'm passionate about, is let's get more females at the top. Once you're there, though, that your role doesn't stop, right? You got to pull people. If it took me X amount of years to get from here to here, I don't want my other female colleagues to face that, right? How do I build up that
Yeah.
organizational support? How do I become, instead of a mentor, I'm becoming a sponsor? But it's up to us, right? It's not, we have great allies in the male community, but honestly, the females have to step up and create more sponsorship versus mentorship. We need more sponsorship so we can really start to have this equal playing field that we've been talking about since 1980s, guys. That thing, the needle hasn't moved much. It needs
Yeah.
to move.
Yeah. Laurel, anything you want to add?
So I faced a little bit of a different challenge as a woman and moving into leadership because I was good at the operational aspect. It was hard to get past that because they didn't want to lose. They knew I was running all 36 clients and we weren't getting complaints. We were meeting all of our stats and our production goals, and she's doing good there. Why rock that boat? Someone else may not do as good as she does. And I mean, I literally had to fight the battle and continuously have the conversation. If I'm good at this, give me an opportunity. I can be good at that, and getting that seat at the table. And now that even that I've achieved a seat at the table, I still feel like sometimes more administrative tasks are handed to me and my voice isn't listened to as much. And so it's something that I constantly strive with, to be like, I'm not your assistant. I'm happy to help do this or do that, but this is not my role, and don't look at me in that aspect. Just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I can't be good at other things, and give me that opportunity to prove it.
Well, that's fascinating, Laurel. Because I imagine, I mean, I'm sure Whitney has similar stories. Like we are all women in this industry, but I mean, how many of us have played up the I can work harder facade just to have that seat at the table or hope for that seat at the table? I mean, I think I was telling Whitney not too long ago that I've never had a picture of my daughter in my desk. It just always made me feel paranoid that people would say, oh, well, she can't handle this or that because she has a child. So even though I didn't hide my child, I didn't highlight that part of my life because I was after growth. And now that I look back on it, I feel that that's such a gross segmentation of who I am. And I did it just for the hope of continued progress.
Go ahead.
I was going to say a quick story because, as entrepreneurs, right, when we're looking at, when we are, uh, uh, oftentimes people are like, you're never home. Is your baby okay? And I'm like, how many times would you ask that to a male colleague that travels all the time? That stuff has to, you have to handle that with good humor, like wittiness, and actually coach them to say, it shouldn't matter. Like, those things are evaluated. I would say there's been a couple of instances where people assume like maybe I'm not a good parent, or I'm not trying, or I'm you're too much in the limelight. It's just those things don't get scrutinized at the same level if this was my other co-founders, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Is I've had the same experiences because I do travel for work, and I get the same kind of comments, but not just from maybe people within in the industry, but like family members, friends,
Oh, yeah.
outside of the professional realm. You get this judgment that comes along, that is because I am a woman and I travel. Are you a good mom? Are you there for your child? What events are you missing? And it just, I can so get on my soapbox about that. So I'm so glad that you brought that up and talked about that, because that gets me.
It's infuriating. It really is. As a matter of fact, maybe we'll cut this out, I'm sure. But my ex-husband fought custody because I work too much, even though he refused to pay child support. So it was like, what am I supposed to do? Stay home with the baby and not work so that you'll be happy, but you don't contribute? I mean, yeah, I think Whitney and I can really just completely take over this conversation.
Yes,
Sorry.
absolutely. Absolutely. So
Even with my children
obviously,
being grown now, I'm sorry, Whitney.
no, go
Oh, yeah,
ahead.
it doesn't stop
I
at
still get
18.
the stigma. I mean, because my children are grown, out of college, living their own lives. But
Yeah.
like,
That's
my husband's
crazy.
retired, and they're like, because I do travel a lot, and they'll
Mhm.
be like, "Well, how does your husband feel about that?" And I'm like, "I guess he's okay with it because it is what it is." And I said, "Yeah, of course he misses me, and he wants me to be at home, but he's also proud of me and what I'm accomplishing. But he's a
Right.
grown man. He doesn't, And so
Correct.
I'm like, where is that question coming from? And would you ask him the same if our roles were reversed? And
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's
Mhm,
the question, right? That's the question. I think we know the answer too.
mhm,
So obviously, being a woman and the experiences of that in the industry are super close to all of our hearts. And you also both mentioned claims and the process and how that could be improved. What are some other issues that you either have already talked about on the podcast or maybe want to get on the podcast that you feel like are not being talked about enough in the industry, or some voices that are not being heard enough out there?
I have so many. I will say operational inefficiencies, manual processes are big
Mm,
issues.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to invest in fixing things because it's so costly.
Mhm.
Data is there's so much dirty data and inaccurate and incomplete, and that's another one of the big issues. And claims transformation, nobody really wants to address it much because it's money going out the door instead of money coming in the door.
Right.
But they just I think we're finally getting the wave to see, you change your customers experience, you change your employees experiences, you you have the possibility of retaining that business and getting new business from word of mouth and doing that, but you've got to fix the broken processes. So I think we're wrapping up our season on ICA and the annual claims conference, and Bobbie and I are really starting to dig deep and figure out what we want our next season to be. But I think it's all around, to me, how this AI wave, automation, digitalization, there's some great points about it, and it's going to be great tools, but we're not there fully yet. We've got to change. It's
mm-hmm.
got to be in succession and baby steps and getting
Yeah.
to that point instead of, ooh, the big, I mean, every conference I've been to in the last year is focusing on AI, machine learning, and all
Yeah.
that. It's all great, but there's things you got to do to get to that point first. And
Right.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that, Laurel and I, as we're planning a little bit of sneak peek on, I'm going to do it, Laurel, but, oftentimes we hear on stage, we talked about, like the big titles, the big names. I would tell you that there's so much innovation and new thought process coming from carriers that are mid-size and smaller. And how do we get some of those voices, that executive level leadership that it takes out, right? There's so much that in our industry we're so focused on the big top 10 tiers, which are amazing, but they're huge. They have a lot of capital. They have a huge number of assets under management. But the little folks, the little guys, and the smaller companies, though they may are smaller in asset size, they're doing so much cool things. And how do we bring their voices that pretty much get not really heard in the bigger stage? They have smaller conferences for them, but how do we amplify those?
Yeah.
and the
Oh,
creative
that's
solutions
huge.
they've come up with. I mean,
Yes.
some of them, when I've sat down and talked to them, I'm just like, why is nobody doing this? Why are they
Mhm.
not looking at it like this? And it's because, I want to say it's the Amazon phase. Everybody wants it now and wants it prime delivery. And, some of it has to be a little bit scaled back and done better. And these smaller, mid-sized companies are really putting their focus and their efforts on how to not only improve their customer experiences, because that's what's their bread and butter, but their employee experiences. Because when you look at it too, the tenure of employees that they carry and they have, some of these people have spent their entire lives there, and they want to make their lives better, and then they want to attract the next generation as well. So they're really focused on doing it the right way and not making the big splash, but doing it cohesively to make their business better for everybody involved. And we're excited to get those voices out. And
Yeah. Speaking of sneak peeks and podcasts and things to come, one of the things that I'd love to hear from both of you is a moment or story from the podcast that really had a significant impact either on you or some of your listeners that maybe reached out after and said, "Oh my gosh, this resonated so much for me."
you want to go first, Bobbie, or?
Yeah, there's so many. I would say the fraud season has been like amazing. So we had a guest that started, I would say multiple guests that were talking about their passion, their love of just really eradicating and processes that they've done. Um, those are the Richard Marquez of the world, right? Like that podcast, he could go on and on and on about that. I think those are things that folks get excited and then they tune in. And we got recommendations, after we had a lawyer that's now working in the LTC space, Jane. She was just amazing at talking about how do you combat this $300 million fraud industry and how there needs to be a balance between people and technology and some of the great work that they're doing with Fusion Analytics. So I think those are the two ones that were like, even all of our guests, we love all of our guests, but those are the two that really stick out from what I hear from the industry.
And this one hasn't been posted yet. It's coming up, but it's rang true with me. We recorded it last week, and we were talking about the upcoming ICA hashtag Dallas 400 education conference. And the person told me that they switched jobs in the middle of their life, switched complete industry, careers, everything. And one of their first things was to go to this conference. And they're now a board member, they're a committee leader, they've been involved. And what that conference meant to them and how it's changed their whole network, their view on the insurance industry and all of that. And I just sat there going, I can resonate with that, and I'm excited for our listeners to hear it. I mean, they haven't heard it yet, but I think we'll get some connections based off of that, and people reaching out saying, I feel that way too, because, things that I was exposed to early into my career through a great mentor at the time who wanted me to learn everything. She sent me to a SIU conference. She saw my bug for the investigative aspect, and she invested that in me. And companies doing that with their employees, just you get a bug for this industry. And I mean, so many people we've talked to have said this was never their career choice, this was never their plan in life, they happened into it. And and it's because I think the community in the industry, I think the tribes and the connections and the way, even if we work for competing companies or we're all bidding for the same project, we all listen to each other and have each other's backs. And I think that really shows in the conferences and where you go. I get excited, not just because I'm going to get on stage and speak, because that's my least exciting piece. It's to see the people and have the conversations. And I mean, I don't go to any conference where I don't come out of it learning something and being better from it.
Entirely. I think conferences are such a game changer. Like you, I spent time in claims, but I never got that mentor that sent me to a conference. I sent myself to a conference, and it made all the difference in my career, in my outlook of my career. I mean, I recommend it to anybody who is struggling with their current position, to just open their eyes to how enormous the industry is and how welcoming. I mean, this industry is magical, I think. It really is full of very welcoming people, and we're all nerding out on the same thing, It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we definitely want to be respectful of time. So we're going to wrap up. And I just want to thank both of you for joining us today. And to all of our listeners, we're so glad that you're here with us. Thank you for joining us to talk about these really important industry topics. And we will see you guys on the next one.
Thanks so much,
Thanks so
guys.
much.